Hello everyone and welcome to the Voice of Pharmacy. I'm Sharif Gurgi, and in today's episode we will be talking about a topic that I've heard repeatedly from many pharmacists over the past while that they wanted to get more information on. And that's the status of cannabis distribution in Canada, both on the recreational side and on the medicinal side. To speak to this and more, I'm very pleased to have with me today Amy Solomon, SVP of Public Affairs at the Neighborhood Pharmacy Association of Canada. Amy, welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Sharif.
Amy, for the benefit of those of us who are not too close to the cannabis file, can you start us off by giving us a high-level state of affairs?
Thank you, Sharif. So today, currently, in Canada, there are 300,000 Canadians who are accessing cannabis for medicinal purposes based on their medical conditions. There are 13,000 physicians who are providing medical notes for that consumption based on whatever medical need those patients may have. Effective October 17th, 2018, the federal government has taken the bold step of legalizing cannabis for recreational purposes. And so they've worked with the provinces and the federal government to access it through different channels based on whether it's medicinal or whether it's for recreational purposes.
So on the recreational side, the access will be, some will be in jurisdictions will have online access and others will have private retailers. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So in Ontario, for example, they will start with the Ontario Cannabis Store and in October of 2018 and move beyond online to having front shop retailers from the private sector making cannabis available recreationally for recreational purposes.
And that will be as of April 2019, correct?
That's right. That's right.
And what about the age of consumption? Is it the same across all jurisdictions or will it differ?
So the federal government has left that decision to the provinces. And so province by province, for the most part, they've aligned it with the age of consumption for alcohol. So, for example, in Ontario, it will be 19 years of age. In Alberta, it will be 18 years of age.
Right. So basically all jurisdictions, the age of consumption will be 19 years or older, except Alberta, and I believe Quebec is also as well.
That's right.
At 18 as well.
That's right.
Speaking of recreational cannabis, NAPRA released a position statement in July 2017 stating that pharmacy practitioners must not be involved in the distribution of cannabis for non-medical purposes. And later in the same position, they said that in the interim, pharmacists will continue to be involved in providing patients with information and guidance. So I see those two statements as a reflection of the paradigm of pharmacy. From one end, we acknowledge the pharmacist's role and value in providing consultation and care about a certain drug, but from the other end, we exclude pharmacists from being involved in the distribution of that same drug. So how is that fair and how is that right? And have you had any conversations with NAPRA or with regulatory colleges or with the federal government regarding the involvement of pharmacists in the distribution of recreational cannabis?
It's a terrific question, Sharif, and I think there's always a healthy tension and dynamic between, the regulator and the business and profession, and ensuring that that future of pharmacy and the value of pharmacy is realized, and that pharmacists, as the most accessible healthcare professionals in the healthcare system, can actually remain accessible and services are fully realized and optimized. Means that we have to work together with all stakeholders as a pharmacy community. So at Neighborhood, we have ongoing discussions with the provincial associations, with the regulatory colleges in each province, along with NAPRA, and with the federal and provincial governments. It's absolutely critical that we fully optimize the skills and knowledge of pharmacists and pharmacy. And we just don't have the resources within our public healthcare system to deny the medication expertise that pharmacists provide.
Absolutely. I'm in full agreement that we have to maximize the scope and the utilization of the scope and the knowledge that all healthcare professionals have. But the model in pharmacy, especially community pharmacy, is different from some of the other healthcare providers in the fact that community pharmacy is a retail business. So when we talk about not having pharmacy involved in the distribution of certain drug, but at the same time, we expect pharmacy to be available and open to answer questions from the public on that drug. And we know that pharmacy will be receiving at least 100 questions a day, especially when this becomes legal, from public asking questions about is it safe to take the recreational cannabis with their medications, if there could be any contraindications with their medical conditions, or what side effects to expect, and so on. So pharmacists will be fielding a lot of those questions on a daily basis. How do you see this going? Do you see that there is an opportunity for us to be able to find a way to have pharmacy to be involved?
So, I mean, I have no crystal ball. I can tell you as a mother of 2 sons that we have one of the safest supply chains in the world when it comes to pharmaceutical distribution. That pharmacy and pharmacists play a very important role in safeguarding against things like the opioid crisis which we face today. So certainly having the involvement of pharmacy makes sense to me as a mother. I'm not, I can't predict what the federal government or provincial governments may ask our members to do. I can tell you we've had municipal leaders reach out to us in recent days and ask what the role of our members may be in the distribution of cannabis. When people are accessing something that can be used, in combination with other drugs and have impacts on the effects of those medications, I would hope that they would seek the advice of a medical professional, and in particular a pharmacist. I would hope that their advice would be valued and appropriately compensated, just as a physician's advice is both gated by an appointment that you make and the reimbursement that's provided to them.
Let's move on to medicinal cannabis. Can you explain how currently Canadian patients have access to this drug?
So currently Canadians access medicinal cannabis by registering with Health Canada. So there are 300,000 Canadians who are registered to use cannabis medicinally, and they access it through licensed producers. So there are over 150 licensed producers currently in Canada, and they're distributing it online, so by mail order.
By mail order. So that means that if a patient runs out of their medication, they will have to wait until it gets mailed to them, unlike other medications where you would just go to the pharmacy and be able to have easy and convenient access to it.
That's right. There is a gap in care, and there's a potential for limited access and burden to patients.
So it doesn't look like that system is efficient, especially from the perspective of patient care. And I know that NPAC, along with OPA and CPHA, they have been each calling for changes to provincial and federal legislation to allow for medicinal cannabis to be distributed and dispensed at community pharmacies. And that's obviously for good reasons. Cannabis is a drug, and pharmacists are the drug experts. We are highly accessible. We have the distribution channels. We dispense narcotics and controlled substances already. We have access to the full patient medication history. We assess for the appropriateness of therapy, for the appropriateness of the dose. We provide clinical advice, counseling, and guidance. We monitor and identify drug misuse and abuse, and we are the last line of defense at the end of the day. before the prescription is dispensed. So it seems that all of this is a very straightforward message. Nobody's arguing with that. I can't think of anyone who can argue with that. So why is it still not happening? Why are we still overlooked in both the federal and provincial legislation?
It's a terrific question, Sharif. I can tell you that the Canadians for Access to Medical Marijuana, the patient advocates have been strongly advocating for this for some time to ensure a level playing field for those patients accessing cannabis for medical purposes. Having them have that access to cannabis for medical purposes beyond the mail order system and having pharmacy involved makes perfect sense from a public health perspective, from a public safety perspective. You can imagine a patient who's been diagnosed with CNIV living in a long-term care facility being told that they have to self-administer and that it's beyond the medication records that they may have. There's potential for diversion, of course, in that system. There's also potential for, the wrong titration and dosages. So it certainly makes the most sense to have pharmacy involved. A mother whose child may have epilepsy, severe epilepsy, and be seeking support for their children, or somebody who has chronic pain and currently on opioids may want to go in the light of day to the pharmacy and actually access the services of a medication expert, pharmacist, and then have it dispensed there along with their other medications to ensure that oversight and the integrity of the supply chain of all their medications and the history is there.
Absolutely. So how optimistic are you in terms of the success of the advocacy efforts to be able to achieve that?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature. I think it will take pharmacists standing up and ensuring that this is the government recognizes that we're partners in the healthcare system. We are there to ensure community safety. We are there to ensure the integrity of the supply chain and the best and safest consumption for Canadians. So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you how it will evolve. I do hope that people begin to think pharmacy first in terms of cannabis, given that every other prescription medication goes through the pharmacy supply chain.
So, what should pharmacy professionals expect to happen over the next few months, and how they can be best prepared for it?
So just as I think pharmacy prepared very well and now delivers over 40% of the vaccines available, that during flu season, making as critical partners within public health care, I would say education is the first step. So ensuring that they're taking any courses that they can through the colleges, through the professional associations, so OPA and RXA, depending on the province that they're in, and that they're also, having conversations with their colleagues about that preparation, and they're feeling ready to have those difficult conversations with consumers. I would also say that, being prepared to have an open dialogue with your patients about that consumption is critical. And it's like any other product that is launched onto the market or becomes available to Canadians. I think the first step is in understanding, how that drug will interact with a patient's other medications and taking into account those risk benefits based on the patient profile.
Aside from that, is there anything else that you feel pharmacists should be doing or be prepared to do?
I would say, as any medical professional, understanding, what is on the horizon and what are the possibilities. So what has happened in other jurisdictions, whether it be Germany or Uruguay, who, understood that pharmacy was an essential component of their legal regimes in accessing cannabis, that being prepared for the different strains, being prepared beyond the education of, we can't know where it could be stored in terms of distribution. There are lots of questions that remain. The college will determine the accreditation, I'm sure, whether it be over the counter, whether it be behind the counter. Those are things that we simply don't have the answers to the questions on, but we're working hand in as health partners with the federal, provincial, the regulatory bodies to ensure that we are ready, that patients will have access to, the information that they need, and that we're able to provide that advice.
So Amy, thank you. That has been a very informative talk. I certainly did learn a lot, and I hope you did as well. And thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear from you, so please reach out to me. And remember that as a profession, the only way we can move forward is through collaborating together. And to collaborate effectively, we need to be first properly informed, and then we need to be actively engaged. And this is all I really would like to achieve from this initiative of the Voice of Pharmacy. Thank you, and see you next time.